Hello you wonderful Magic players out there, and welcome to this second video in my series on free-to-play and Magic the Gathering Arena. Before we jump into looking at the color black, I just wanted to touch more in depth about the wildcard system. What's going to happen when you've started your account and you've started your daily grind for coins is that you're going to earn wildcards, but you're going to earn them at a very slow rate, especially for your rare slot. So what I suggest is that you spend your rare wildcards on things such as shock lands and check lands in the beginning, and you use your rare slots kind of as the longevity insurance for your account. Because if you spend all your rare wildcards on very specific or narrow cards, well, you're going to get bored of your deck within a week or so, and you're going to want to try something new. And if you're always stuck without the lands that you need, you're not going to have such a good time as you could have. So let's instead have a look at a monocolor deck, a black deck. So let's have a look at creating a monocolored black deck and see how I would do it if I were to create a monocolored black deck with what I know right now. But before we do that, if you're creating your account for the first time, and before you go spending any wildcards, check out the link in the description where I've linked to a site where you can check out the dual colored starter decks and what cards are included in those decks, so that you don't spend your precious wildcards on cards that you're going to get anyways from those decks, because you're going to earn those within a week or so if you play regularly. Also, when you start out, I would suggest that you build cards which are useful in the current meta game and that can be splashed in. Maybe, for instance, if you're playing black, consider that in the future you might be playing something as Grixis or Golgari or something when you got enough shock lands or check lands. So try to build some cards that are useful in most archetypes, I would suggest, at least when you're starting out. A card such as Barrier of Bones has a lot of problems. It's not the best card, and also it only fits really into one archetype of deck, and that is a Dimir control, surveil kind of thing with the disinformation campaign. So instead, try to go for something that you can get a lot more mileage out of, such as I would suggest a Divest or a Duress. Actually, my suggestion is to go for the Divest. With the current metagame, like, which one is best, Duress or Divest? Well, they're both no Thoughtseizes, and there are no Inquisition of Cosilexes. They're still fine cards, but they really depend on the current metagame which one is good to use. I would suggest, if I were to build a deck, to go something like 3 Divest, 1 Duress or something, because from what I've seen, most decks contain a lot of creature cards, and if you get multiple Divest in your starting hand, that's for the most part going to be fine against anything except maybe, I don't know, Jeskai control. But if you get stuck with a lot of Duresses in your hand, that's going to be a problem against many decks which runs almost exclusively creatures. But something like 3 to 4 Divest and 1 Duress, maybe 2 Duress. If you're going to build a sideboard as well, you can of course go for the full 4-pack with this. Another good card to get as maybe a 1-of early is getting a Fungal Infection. You're maybe not going to want to have too many of these, so if you're planning to buy cards from the Dominaria set, then maybe you can skip these, because you will maybe get these anyway in your packs. But otherwise, a 1-of Fungal Infection can be a really good card. Other than that, if we move on to the uncommon slot, a Pilfering Imp can be a really good uncommon card. I wouldn't suggest crafting this card unless you want to create a control kind of deck, or a deck where you want to discard your opponent's card. It's a bit of a narrow card in that sense, but it's a really good card in the current meta game. It really punishes the big control decks, which are, if you play against the best decks, you're probably playing against a control deck. So in that sense, having a Pilfering Imp is really good in my opinion. Moving on. Here is, I think, the unsung hero of the black decks, Burglar Rat. Unless you're playing against something like a mono green deck where it's kind of scary to run out your Burglar Rat on turn 2 and get a 6/6 trample, I think, hexproofer against you. Burglar Rat is really a good card to get early card advantage. The thing is that very many cards in the current current metagame are there's a lot of 1/1s, not 1/1s. There's a lot of 1 toughness creatures in the current metagame. So very often, at least in my experience, Burglar Rat trades for something when you play it out. And this is kind of the worst case scenario for opponent, where first you have to discard a card so you lose 1 card, and then this card even trades with one of their dorks. So it's a great card, a great creature, a great body to get down even as a chump blocker against bigger creatures. I really like this card and I think it goes into any kind of deck. Like if you have some kind of equipment in your deck, this card is great. You can just equip it with it, or maybe if you have some kind of way to buff it. But it even goes into a control deck. You can discard your opponent's card. You always get at least 1 card out of your opponent's hand with this. So yeah, it's a solid card. I really recommend you picking up Burglar Rat for your initial deck if you can. Here's another consideration for your early wildcards, that is Cast Down. But I wouldn't suggest you create this right off the bat, and that is because you're going to start out with 4 murder cards. And while those are not as good as Cast Down, I would argue, because they cost 3 mana, you can still use the murder cards while you build up your collection. So initially I wouldn't go for a Cast Down, simply because you have the murders and there are more important cards to get in the beginning with your wild cards than Cast Down. And maybe go for Cast Down when you've got all your commons and uncommons in place. Then try upgrading your murders to Cast Downs, or maybe the Kill Merfolk variant as well. That works as well. For this second page, what would I create here? The only thing I would even consider creating, I think, from this page is Dusk Legion Zealot. It's a decent card. It's kind of similar to the Burglar Rat in that you always it's good card advantage. You get a draw out of this, so it replaces itself, and it's a good chump blocker, and in many cases it can actually trade with something on the board, and you can actually get a 2-for-1 out of this card. So it's a decent card. The reason why I probably wouldn't create this, and the reason why I kind of disfavor this versus the Burglar Rat, is that I think that discarding cards works better into the black kind of plan, the kind of how most black decks are created and constructed, and also that you lose 1 life. It's actually relevant, I think, losing 1 life with a very aggressive meta and a lot of red decks running around. Losing 1 life is actually relevant, I think. Moving on. The Knight of Malice is another decent card. I wouldn't create this as one of the first cards, but it's definitely in the right type of deck. You're probably going to want, of course, because this is a knight, some kind of black-white deck. In that kind of archetype and kind of knight archetype, this card can really work great. It has first strike and hexproof in white, both which are very relevant, and it gets +1/+0 if your opponent has a white permanent, which is relevant, and there's a lot of white weenie decks running around. This just gets past those decks. Another interesting pickup here is Kitesail Freebooter. Kitesail Freebooter, you'll get I think 2 of these in the starter decks, but it's worth if you're going for a mill plan or if you're going for some kind of small creature discard kind of deck to pick this up. This screws with most decks, especially if you're running, for instance, 4 Divest in your main deck, starting your first turn with a Divest, removing an important creature, following that up with a Kitesail Freebooter in removing a very good non-creature spell. Then you're really far ahead against most, against the average starting hand. Even if this gets killed further along the line, you still bought a lot of time. It's a decent body. It's a 1/2, so it doesn't die to all the 1 toughness removal. Yeah, it's a great card, I would say, in the current meta game. Moving on to another great card, Moment of Craving. This is a card I would actually consider, depending on the deck I'd be creating. I'd definitely consider creating a couple of these. If you look at what you get for this, is a -2/-2, but the thing is that you can use this to you can use this as a combat trick because it's an instant, and also you gain 2 life, and that 2 life is the reason why I would maybe play this in some decks over something such as Deadweight, because those 2 lives are very important, especially versus red decks. If we're going for something like Golgari, then of course Seeker Squire can be great, but I don't think Seeker Squire fits into just any deck. I think you need to have a deck with a bit more thought around it to run Seeker Squire, and you probably need 1 more color to make this work. Moving on, Walk the Plank, another great card. There aren't too many Merfolks that you need to worry about. Of course, if you're up against the Merfolk starter deck, you're going to have a bad time with 4 Walk the Plank in your main deck. But something like maybe, I don't know, 2 to 3 Walk the Plank, 2 to 3 cast downs could work great if you're in a controller deck and you want to have a lot of removal. Yeah, moving on. Here there's not too much that I would consider. Of course, if I'm building a vampire deck, I would definitely consider this. This is a real good card if you're playing a vampire deck. Your opponent losing 2 cards is great card advantage in itself, but also losing 2 life and you gaining 2 life, that's a big swing right there. Really great card, I would say, in the current metagame, especially with the many aggressive decks that we're seeing. Here we have Golden Demise, initially one of my maybe favorite cards in black. It clears out most things that you're up against, and also when you ascend, it has the added benefit of only hitting your opponent's creatures, which I think is great. It kills the vanguards, the Aldanto vanguards, and the bodyguards in white, I mean, and really has a lot of usage. If you're going for something like a very control-y black deck, and if you're not playing that many creatures, which this will kill, so that you don't kill your own creatures, then I think this is a great pickup. If on the other hand you're playing a lot of small creatures, then Heartless Pillage is a really good uncommon pickup, I think. It's maybe not the card I would, maybe not one of the first cards I would suggest creating in the uncommon slot, unless you're going for a very specific discard strategy. But getting rid of 2 cards from your opponent's hand, again, great card advantage, and also if you can get the treasure out, especially if you're running something like treasure map, which is great in a black deck in general, then you then you've basically done a 3-for-1 for 3 black, and I think that's about as good as you can get for a 3-drop. Moving on to my favorite card, maybe my favorite card in black at the moment. This card, Plaguemare, is just so good. Does a lot of things that I like. Compared to a card such as the earlier Golden Demise, you would think it was a lot worse, because this is -2/-2, and this does -1/-1 to all your opponent's creatures. But for the most parts, against most decks, I found that the -2/-2 is not it's not that useful. In most cases, -1/-1 is good enough to clear what you need to clear. This is mostly something you run out against tokens, and maybe against the Golgari creatures when they've failed to explore into something other than a land, for instance. You run out this, but you can also use this as a combat trick. I've done this a lot of times where I've run out a Burglar Rat turn 2, and then I attack into the opponent's creatures. They jump block with, let's say, 2/2 or something, and then I drop the Plaguemare, and I kill whatever creature blocked my Burglar Rat, for instance. This is a great card. It also has the additional advantage of not being able to be blocked by white creatures, which is actually relevant with a lot of white Ween decks around. It's just a very good, I would say, a meta card. It's definitely not the best card in a vacuum. Like, if I didn't know what the meta game was, I wouldn't, have a Plaguemare as a go-to card. But in the current meta game, I think this is a really, really strong card. The last card that I would suggest you build or consider building is, let's see where I can find it. Yeah, here it is. The Eldest Reborn. If you were lucky enough to have used the promo code, there was a promo code about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago, where you typed in Game Awards and you got a full playset of Eldest Reborn along with some other useful uncommon cards in other colors. But if you don't have access to that card, if you didn't use that promo code, or if you're starting out anew right now, then I would really suggest when you've built your maybe your Plaguemares, to get a full playset, or maybe at least 1 or 2 Eldest Reborn in your deck. The Eldest Reborn is really good in the current metagame. That's one of the reasons why I really like it. It gets rid of stuff which is really hard to get rid of, stuff such as hexproof creatures. It gets rid of planeswalkers, and most decks actually, not only are you going to get one card, at least one card off the board with this, but in many cases you're going to get 2 or 3, even if your opponent kills this on his when you pass the turn. You've killed something with it, so you gained 1 card there, and also him using a removal card against this means he's not using that removal card on something else in your deck. So you're getting 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, and if for some reason he doesn't kill this, then whatever you killed is coming back and he's discarding a card, so then you're getting 3 cards for 1. So you're either getting a 3-for-1 or a 2-for-1 in any case with the Eldest Reborn, which makes it one of my current favorite standard cards if you're going for mono black, or if you're splashing black in general. I think this is a great card in many decks. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to cover from black. Sign off in the comments and type what you would build. What cards would you use if you had, you know, 4 uncommons and 8 commons? How would you suggest spending them? For me personally, I would suggest building Divest, maybe some Duresses, but my special recommendation goes out to my long-time friend and hero, the Burglar Rat. I would definitely suggest building 4 Divest, 4 Burglar Rats, and 4 Plague Mares for the current meta. That is my suggestion. But write in the comments what you would build, and let's compare notes. See you next time.